When you think of comic book rogues galleries, most people will point to Batman or Spider-Man as having the best array of villains. Most people, even comic book fans, would struggle to name a lot of villains for most DC heroes. Heck, as far as the general public goes, Lex Luthor and General Zod are probably about the only Superman villains they could name. Maybe Brainiac and Doomsday, but even that's a big maybe. Supergirl, aka Kara Zor-El, is my personal favorite superhero, so I thought it'd be fun to explore her array of villains. And what better clickbait-friendly way to do that than a top 10 list? I am counting Supergirl across all media, so the list will feature villains from both the comic books and the television show. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe, and you can support the channel on Patreon. Number 10, Black Flame. This is a villain from the Silver Age, making her debut in Action Comics number 304 in the story The Maid of Menace, written by Leo Dorfman, with art by Jim Mooney. She arrives claiming to be a descendant of Supergirls from the future, but one who chose a life of crime and even became queen of a pirate planet. I actually wish that was the case, because that's the most interesting part of the story for me. An evil descendant from the future who is also a space pirate. That's awesome. And what a fun moral dilemma for Supergirl. In a twist, however, it turns out that Black Flame is scientist Zora Villar of the Bottle City of Kandor. She was an admirer of a villain we will talk about in a minute, who plotted to switch places with Supergirl, trapping the hero in Kandor so that she could be free. That villain was killed, so Zora decided to fulfill her plan, taking on the mantle of Black Flame. The lie of being from the future was to convince Kara to give up her superpowers. Zora ranks for two reasons. One is that I like the lie a lot. I think Zora should be brought back with this as her actual backstory. I think that would be a really fun story for Supergirl. Two, I like the continuity present. Zora has ties to this previous villain and important Supergirl stories. Black Flame made a couple more appearances before being erased thanks to Crisis on Infinite Earths and has not been used since. Though again, I think there's real potential here. DC, write a Supergirl story with Black Flame as the villain. Heck, I'll do it. Number 9, Lesla Lar. This is the villain that Black Flame idolized. She debuted in Action Comics number 279 in Supergirl's Secret Enemy, written by Jerry Siegel, with art by Jim Mooney. Her initial story is a pretty cool multi-part tale that begins in Action Comics number 278, where Supergirl discovers she's lost her superpowers. 279 reveals that Kandorian scientist Lesla Lar built a device to take away Supergirl's powers. As I mentioned, her ultimate goal is to switch places with Supergirl. Kara is trapped in Kandor, believing she's Lesla, while the villain forms an alliance with Lex Luthor and plans to kill Superman. This is foiled by Krypto, the Superdog, who can tell Lesla isn't Supergirl. In the final issue of the story, Action Comics number 282, Lesla is arrested in Kandor, and Superman villain Mr. Mxyzptlk restores Supergirl's powers. Lesla is jealous of Kara's potential fame and success once she's revealed to the world, which makes a lot of sense considering she's trapped in a bottle. I'd be kinda pissed too. She's this fun master manipulator kind of character who plans to kill Lex once she's done with him. Very crazy and sneaky. Additionally, major things happen for Supergirl here. When she loses her powers, she is finally able to be adopted. She had spent all previous issues in an orphanage by decree of Superman. But the Danvers family finally adopts her, and just a couple issues after getting her powers back, Supergirl is revealed to the world and allowed to be a public figure. All of which is kind of thanks to Lesla. She's a forgotten but essential part of Silver Age Supergirl's history. She would come back later, switching places with Lena Luthor instead of Supergirl, and teaming up with prisoners of the Phantom Zone, who eventually turn on her and kill her, though her ghost would later appear to try and possess Supergirl. Number 8, Decay and Psi. In the early 80s, Supergirl got her second solo series, The Daring New Adventures of Supergirl, written by Paul Kupperberg, with pencils by Carmine Infantino, inks by Bob Oxner, and colors by Tom Zucco. One of the things I really loved about this series was that it felt like the creatives were really excited about writing Supergirl and giving her her due. Part of that was an attempt to create a wide rogues gallery for her. The first villain was Psi, aka Gale Marsh, a young psychic being manipulated by an extremist named Mr. Pendergast. He believes the world is in the bad shape it is due to an external force he calls the decay, and feels it is their job to wipe out moral decay using Psy's abilities. When Psy is unable to defeat Supergirl, Pendergast pulls a gun with the intention to kill her. She reacts out of fear, her powers turning Pendergast into a monster that drains the life force of people. Decay. I like Pendergast's warped view about the moral fiber of America. He's a little cartoony but fun, and I like his manipulation of Gale, who ultimately turns on him. Her costume is terrible, though. Psy would get reworked into more of an ally during the Rebirth era, appearing in the fun Escape from the Phantom Zone storyline. Psy was also adapted on the TV show, played by Yael Grobeglass. In the show, she is a bank robber with psychic powers that help Supergirl later in the season. Number 7. Reactron. Reactron is another creation from the Daring New Adventures of Supergirl, debuting in that series' 8th issue. Sterling Gates would later utilize the character during the New Krypton era. He's on the list not because he's the most interesting character or anything, he's kinda just an a-hole with some personal vendettas. No, he's on the list for the sheer damage he does to Supergirl. He is given a gold kryptonite heart and just wreaks hell. If you don't know, New Krypton was a story in which 100,000 Kryptonians were brought to live on Earth after being freed from their bottle city, including Kara's birth parents, Zor-El and Allura. Reactron and Metallo attacked New Krypton, which had been raised into space. The former killed Zor-El, and towards the end of the entire saga, destroyed New Krypton, killing Allura as well. So this dude murdered both of her parents, as well as destroying her chance to be reunited with her people and culture. Vicious. Reactron was also adapted on the show, played by Chris Browning. There he's given a much more sympathetic backstory and history with Superman that I liked a lot. Though I do think it's kind of ironic that one of the few proper Supergirl villains they adapted for that show was given a history with Superman. Number 6. Black Star. Another one from Daring New Adventures, this one making her proper first appearance in issue number 13. Black Star is a Jewish woman who was separated from her mother in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany. She amused a Nazi officer who more or less adopted her. A combination of being raised in a Nazi household and feeling that her mother abandoned her led to her ultimately agreeing with the Nazis. She gained powers after coming to America. In the present day of the story, Black Star is the leader of a neo-Nazi group that comes into conflict with Supergirl and, coincidentally, also happens to be the daughter of Kara's landlord. I found this character's backstory so rich. Someone stolen from their culture and taught to hate it by bigots. That's brutal and tragic. This is another character I think is ripe with potential and should come back because she's fascinating. Number 5, Bizarro Girl. Obviously the Bizarro version of Supergirl, a backwards clone. This is a character or concept that has been around for a while, but she makes the list for 2 specific versions. The first is the one from the Bizarro Girl storyline written by Sterling Gates that started in Supergirl number 53. Kara's Bizarra means well, but is also angry and afraid, which makes her very sympathetic. And I love that Kara sees that and decides to help her. The other version is the TV show's adaptation of her. This version is a creation of Maxwell Lord, who kidnapped several comatose women and experimented on them, hoping to create his own Supergirl. All of these women die, except one who successfully becomes Bizarro. I really like this super dark and tragic take on the concept. It's really quite tragic. Number 4, Krem of the Yellow Hills. This is the villain of the Eisner and Hugo nominated miniseries Woman of Tomorrow. And this dude is straight up despicable. Just pure evil. Which works so well for the story because, as a reader, you really kind of want Kara to just kill this dude. I love that this moral conflict of whether he should be killed is about someone without a single redeeming quality. It's a real challenge for Supergirl as he is as resourceful as he is horrible. Number 3, Cyborg Superman. Now you might be familiar with Cyborg Superman as a fun and crazy 90s Superman villain, but with the 2011 New 52 reboot, the character name and concept got retrofitted to be a Supergirl foe. The big twist here is that it is Kara's father, Zor-El, though he initially doesn't know that. Zor-El asked Brainiac for help, and the villain, in turn, experimented on Zor-El and turned him into Cyborg Superman. The initial story with him during New 52 is not that interesting, as he doesn't know he's Zor-El, and Kara doesn't know he's Zor-El, just a spooky robot guy wearing her family crest. However, Steve Orlando makes it work great in the first story of his rebirth run, Reign of the Cyborg Superman. Having regained his memories, Zor-El plans to create Argo City using the same cybernetics he has. However, he needs a life force to properly restore the citizens, and has chosen humans to be that force due to a guilt and anger he feels about being unable to save his own home. And this forces Kara to choose between her birthplace and her adopted home. It's really compelling stuff, in my opinion. There's an emotional core to it that appealed to me. The challenge of Kara having to reject her father and her home. It plays into some of the resentment and anger Kara had been feeling during New 52, and it kind of throws it back in her face. She's confronted with her darkest thoughts in the guise of her father. Number 2, Agent Liberty, Manchester Black, and Lex Luthor. Cheating a little bit here for a couple reasons. Obviously, these are 3 characters, but together they form the main antagonist of the show's 4th season, and for me, it would be impossible to rank one without the others, as the puzzle is so well put together. The other is that these are not traditionally Supergirl villains. Manchester Black and Lex Luthor are obviously Superman villains. And heck, Liberty was more a hero than a villain. But in the show, these characters are so compelling, and Supergirl deals with Lex pretty consistently in the comics, both in the Silver Age and the show. Kara is best friends with Lena Luthor, so just naturally, that's going to lead to Lex stories. And why wouldn't Lex go after Supergirl? His entire ideology for going after Superman also applies to her. In Jeff Loeb's short run, the first villain she really goes up against is Lex. And the show's version is great. Genuinely my favorite version of the character in live action. It's a great performance by John Cryer that focuses on the cruel sociopathic nature of the character. Agent Liberty, or Ben Lockwood, was reimagined as basically a neo-Nazi or white supremacist. He's a normal guy that through intense loss and bad luck begins to resent the alien presence on Earth and eventually is pushed to extremism, becoming a terrorist. Manchester is on the opposite side of that, but basically the same idea. A normal person pushed to extremism due to loss. But he's fighting against liberty, supposedly in favor of alien rights, but truly it's more selfish than that. He believes Supergirl doesn't go far enough, so he deals with more extreme forms of justice. And makes some valid points. Supergirl is caught in the middle of this, and it's a great challenge for her, I think. These aren't things that she can just punch away. These are ideologies that question her existence and her effectiveness. Then it turns out that pretty much everything that happened in the season had been a plot overseen by Lex in a bid for power. An egotistical rich dude playing on people's fears to gain power and control. All of this felt so relevant and so powerful while watching, but also works as compelling drama divorced from the political landscape of modern America. Number 1, Reign. Arguably one of the most iconic Supergirl villains. She was created during the first arc of the New 52 run. Reign was part of an experiment on Krypton called World Killers, so she leads a team of super beings all created on Krypton. They don't quite remember anything other than those base details, so there is a quest for identity that parallels Kara's at the time, which is quite good. Reign is an incredibly powerful force that Supergirl barely manages to hold off, which, combined with the striking design, is part of why she's stuck in people's brains. But obviously the big reason for that, and why I think she is the definitive Supergirl villain, is thanks to the show. Reign is the main antagonist of Season 3, played by Odette Annabelle. The show kept that Reign was created on Krypton, but added a more mystical, religious fanaticism angle to it. And one of the Kryptonians that created Reign and the World Killers is a witch named Selena. If you don't know, Selena was the villain created for the 1984 Supergirl movie. Just a fun detail. The show also added a Jekyll and Hyde element to Reign. She has a normal human persona, Sam, who is friends with Kara. This adds a nice bit of personal stakes as it becomes less about beating up a bad guy and more about saving a friend. Reign is also just freaking rad. The show's design is fantastic. Annabelle has a lot of charisma in the part. The character is incredibly powerful, more powerful than anyone Supergirl has ever fought. She's just so much fun to watch. And the first fight between Supergirl and Reign is fantastic. So that's my list and rank of Supergirl villains. Who are your favorite Supergirl villains? Please let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.